Hey guys, so I know often people will test the product for a short period of time in order to make a review for their audience. But today I'm going to be reviewing a product that I really have used very extensively for several years now. That product is Babbel. So a lot of you guys might know Babbel. They're growing very quickly, I think, all around the world, and their language selection is also increasing quite fast. And I have to say, I have completed almost the entire course catalog for about 3 or 4 different languages, and then I've used it still pretty extensively for another 4 or 5 languages. So I really do know the product inside and out, having used it for so long for so many languages, so I can also compare between different language options. So I will tell you that overall this is going to be a positive review, but I do not want you to confuse that with me having some secret agenda. Everything I'm going to say, these are my honest thoughts after using it for so long, and I'm going to try to be balanced and give you guys negative points as well as positives. And my goal is that by the end of this video, if you have any questions, that you will have them answered and you will be able to make a choice on using the product or not. So it might be a bit long because I want to be thorough. So I'm going to tell you guys the 4 parts of this review, and you can feel free to skip to the ones that are most relevant to you. So first I will talk about my Babbel story so you guys know how much I've used it. Second of all, I will go through the positive points, negative points, and then a conclusion with the question, is it worth the money or not? So my Babbel story. I've been using Babbel for about 3 years now. On and off in the beginning, but when I was living in Portugal, I was going to be moving to Germany in about 6 weeks, and I needed to learn German very quickly. So I already knew that Babbel had a pretty large course catalog for German, so I decided to just focus my efforts on Babbel just to keep things simple, and also because they offer you the ability to download the courses and use them offline, and I did not have a lot of Wi-Fi connectability at the time. Now, I can honestly tell you, after 6 weeks of very, very intensive study, mostly on Babbel, but also some articles online and some YouTube series for listening practice, I arrived in Germany and I could do everything in German. So it was not perfect, I made mistakes, but I was able to function in German after just 6 weeks. Now, that's not to tell you that anybody could do that. Now, I was already a very seasoned language learner at that point, and it was very intense. But it is a testament to how much value there is available for you to extract from those courses if you know how to study them correctly. Now, when I got to Germany, I had a very messy language situation because I had about 8 different languages, but a lot of them were quite low level. And the lower level you have in a language, the more difficult it is to maintain that level. So having so many languages at not great levels made it very difficult and stressful for me to try to maintain them all. And so I decided I have to figure out a way to bring, one by one, bring these languages up to advanced levels so that I can maintain them more easily and enjoy them much more. So I just decided to go for Babbel's special subscription. It's like a 1-year special subscription where you get access to all their languages for a full year, and it's very reasonably priced. It's about $120, and considering what you would pay if you were to subscribe to each different language separately, it's very cheap. So I did that, and I went through, and during that year I devoured an unbelievable amount of language content, and Babbel was a big part of that strategy that I used for each different language, so I really used it a lot. Positive points. First one is that for a lot of their languages, the courses are unbelievably in-depth. You're going to get exposure to several thousand words and phrases and idioms, all kinds of sample dialogues and subjects. It's really impressive. So for example, in French, in Italian, in German, Spanish, all those languages have pretty much a full course catalog, and I like that a lot. The second point is that there's a lot of very natural, interesting, and funny conversations and dialogues. So a lot of courses have the big problem that they use a lot of very formal, obsolete language, which is not how people usually talk in a day-to-day situation. I will say that Babbel was very impressive to me because they have a very colloquial register of speech that they use for most of the content. They very quickly switch over to informal speech, and so if you know how to use it correctly, you can actually develop quite a natural way of speaking a language just by using Babbel, which is not that common, I think, with language resources. The third point is that they use very effective methodology for teaching grammar. This is very important. Now, what they will do is they will have a couple different exercises to teach you some new words, and then there'll be a conversation that uses those words to help you remember them. But in that conversation, they will tend to use grammatical structures here and there that you've never seen before. But there's a translation, and it's not so different from what you know, so you still understand it. You will notice, like, I haven't seen that before. Right afterwards, they give you the explanation. And this is very effective because I find that if you start to read explanations for grammatical points or structures or patterns that you've never seen before, it doesn't really make any sense to you, and sometimes it even confuses you more. I find that if you've already been exposed to how that grammatical component works in context, it's much easier. And then throughout the rest of the course and all the other courses as well, those will be repeated, and so over time your understanding of those different structures will deepen and you'll be able to use them quite naturally eventually. Now, number 4 is also really important. You can move through their whole course catalog freely as you want. Now, there are some services like Duolingo, which is very popular, but one of the problems for me in Duolingo is that it's sequential, so you have to complete the courses in the order that they're given to you. So you can't just skip to adjectives number 4 until you've done, nouns 1 and everything else. This is a problem sometimes, because sometimes you have a very specific need that you need clarified. In Babbel, you can literally go anywhere you want in the entire course catalog. So if you're struggling with the German dative, for example, or the French subjunctive, especially these grammatical things, you can just go straight to the grammar section, find the course on the dative, and you go through it, and you can get exactly what you need right there and then, and move on. Number 5 is that the interface is very well made and very pleasant to use. I think when you have a free resource, you can't really be too picky, but when you're paying for something, I think that as a consumer, you can expect a high standard. And I do think Babbel meets that standard. It's a small detail, but I really like how there are these beautiful photographs attached to every lesson that you do. I don't think I've ever experienced a glitch in the app, so everything works very well. And I also do like that you can contact customer service from inside of the app very easily and quickly. The next one is also really important. All of the lessons can be downloaded and used offline. When I was in Portugal, as I mentioned, I did not have a lot of Wi-Fi and I had no data connection. And with Duolingo, for example, I think it downloads a couple of courses ahead, but once you get through those, there's nothing. And you also cannot do the review feature on Duolingo offline, at least not right now. So with Babbel, you can download the entire catalog if you have enough space on your memory, and use them offline. And then the very last positive point I have is that everything you learn, for the most part, can be reviewed inside the app. Usually I will use Memrise for reviewing content, but that takes time, of course, to make those memorized courses. But with Babbel, you can review everything inside of the review manager. Now, my 2 favorite features of this are, firstly, that it doesn't just give you vocabulary words. You can also review phrases, entire expressions, and therefore you're going to also see the grammatical points you've learned again. So it's a pretty solid review structure. And secondly, you can use simple flashcards, but you can also test your spelling ability. And for example, in German, this helped me to develop really strong spelling skills because I did a lot of review using that feature. Moving on to negative points. So the first negative point I have is that the amount of content available across different languages varies quite dramatically. So for example, French, German, Spanish, Italian. There are 6 beginner courses, each having about 15 to 25 lessons. There are 2 review courses. In German, there's 1 intermediate, and then in the other ones, there are 2 intermediate courses. They have specials. All this stuff I talked about before. They're really solid and complete. Then if you go to Portuguese, for example, and Turkish, there are 6 beginner courses. They have depending on which one, there might be a review course, there are no intermediate courses, and there are much less special courses, and so on. Then if you go down to Dutch, for example, and Russian, then there are only 4 beginner courses and no intermediate courses and much less. So to me, this is a big negative, because now I understand on their side of things, it's probably a lot of work to produce these courses, especially to produce a German course, not just in English, but to produce it in French and Spanish and so on. But from the consumer perspective, if I'm going to pay the same price for a product, then I expect that it matches the same standard across the board. So if I buy a Teach Yourself book or an ASIML book in Portuguese and in Hindi, I would expect that the Hindi course has more or less the same level of content as the other one. And that brings me to the second negative point, which is that their language selection is still has quite a long way to go to compete with other products which have been around longer. So Pimsleur, for example, Teach Yourself, they have unbelievable selections of languages that you can choose from. With Babbel, there are currently 14 languages available for English speakers at least, and yeah, so very often there's been a language that I wanted to study, and then I realized that it was not available at Babbel. So once again, this is kind of natural because they're very young compared to those other companies, but objectively speaking, I do think that's still a negative point for them at this time. So now for my conclusion, overall, I have to tell you, and this is my honest opinion, like I said, for beginner resources, Babbel is by far my favorite. Now, I have been learning languages for quite some time. I've learned quite a few languages to very high levels, and I've tested a lot of products. I will do other reviews. I have to say, Babbel is my go-to. If I'm starting a new language, the first thing I do is check, is there a Babbel course? And with other languages where there have not been options for Babbel, I learn slower because Babbel is just so easy for me to use, and I know exactly how to get what I want from it. So overall, that's my conclusion. And finally, for the question, is it worth the money? I will say yes. Here's why. With things like Rosetta Stone, which you guys probably all know, it's a pretty huge outlay of money in the very beginning, and there are hundreds and thousands probably of stories of people who bought Rosetta Stone and never opened the box. So your investment is gone. Okay, with subscription services, not just Babbel, but Babbel is one of them. Let's say you do a 3-month subscription to Babbel. Well, it's not a massive investment. It's like 25 bucks. Now, I know for some people that may still be a lot, but relatively speaking, it's very low. And yeah, if you don't end up using it that much, or you find you don't really like it, well, you didn't lose too much money. And while there are 4 options, 4 basic options, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And by the way, you can find all this detailed information on my blog article that matches this video. I find that the 3-month is perfect. That's my recommendation to all my students who I recommend it to and my friends, because I find that 3 months is the perfect amount of time to extract everything you need from their courses if you're studying at a pretty decent pace. And after 3 months, I find that you can move on to other stuff, to more advanced content, to more authentic content. So I definitely think this is worth it. It's a lot cheaper, even than a Teach Yourself book with a CD. It's going to be $50, $60 or more. ASIML is similar price. So I think that for 25 bucks for 3 months subscription, you're in and out and you move on. Definitely worth the money. So that's my review. Like I said, overall very positive, but do not confuse that with any sort of ulterior motive. That I support the product and I do recommend it wholeheartedly. So that's why this is a positive review. But if you have any questions, any comments, any constructive criticism, whatever it is, please put it in the comments and I'll be more than happy to answer all your questions. Please visit my blog if you would like to read the review. It's going to be translated into several languages. And yeah, guys, if you like my content, please subscribe. It really helps me out massively. And I love seeing the comments. I love when you guys subscribe. And if you know somebody who would find this useful, please feel free to share. So thank you guys very much. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Ciao.